Hello and welcome to Whimsically Wicked, a reading duet. My name is Haylee and I am the whimsical half.
And my name is Daria and I am the wicked half.
Welcome to another episode of Get Swapped.
Probably our most anticipated episode of Get Swapped.
This one I was really nervous for, and you didn't have high hopes for me to enjoy this one.
No, I think, for context, it's Pride Month, or we're going to be kicking off Pride Month.
I got my Pride shirt on.
I know, I saw that. It looks very cute and very fitting for this book.
Yes, it's a Harry Potter one. It says, "No one should live life in a closet."
And it's got Harry's glasses with rainbows.
How cute is that?
I don't have enough Pride stuff. It's all in like the form of pins and things.
Which you should, because all of your friends.
Every last one of them is gay. Or on some kind of spectrum.
Yeah.
Of being gay. Except for me. I am the only straight friend.
So this is a very anticipated month for us. We care a lot about it, and we have dedicated most of our reads for the podcast to Pride Month, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, and I was so excited for it because I do read a lot of books in the space, sports, romance. I just had a really good urban fantasy series recommended to me by someone I mentor at work, and his partner sent it to me. It was so cute. And it was so good. And I was like, this is perfect. I'm diving into Pride Month and I need more like this.
I find it so funny, though, because you do not like sapphic books.
No.
You're too straight for it.
I'm too straight for that, unfortunately, but I'm here for the boys.
And there he goes.
Oh, that didn't last as long as I thought it would. For context, to anyone listening online, my dog was sitting with us on the couch for all of 5 minutes.
Well, we were going to kick him out because he usually has a full-on meltdown. But he's doing very, very good. We decided to try it out today, and he spent 5 minutes here, and then he left, but he's still sitting like a little good boy.
Yeah, he's probably going to start snoring at some point. I'm sure the mics will pick that up. For today's episode of Get Swapped, I gave Haylee one of my favorite book. No, I take that back. My favorite book of all time. My top read of this year, and I'm gonna say it's gonna sit as top read of the year until December when Brandon Sanderson's new book comes out, and that'll probably be the only thing that could top this for me. And that's gonna have to be really good and make me feel a lot of things and go the way I want it to, because I have expectations for that book now.
You really liked this book.
Yes. You know, people do that 6-star read thing. This would be my 6-star read for this year.
Okay. You knew I wasn't really gonna love this book, but I think we will figure out why. I think there's some very specific reasons why I didn't like this book.
I knew exactly what Haley's problems were going to be going into this book because I know Haylee and her dating life well enough to see the parts of Nico and Bran that she would not be able to empathize with or enjoy.
Yes, and I am self-aware to know exactly where that went wrong for me. Because when I was looking at some of the comments that were made on our videos and people who were really excited to hear my thoughts on this, I could just tell that the reasons that they loved it were also going to be the reasons that I really didn't like it.
Oh, yeah.
And I will say, I don't think I hated it as much as I expected to.
Okay.
But it was a very up and down experience for me, and it was very frustrating.
Like her dating life. Exactly like her dating life.
But true.
It's my favorite entertainment right now. It's really good.
Well, I'm glad you're entertained by my life. But I am always curious about what I find that I'm attracted to in romance novels based on how my dating life is going.
Or the parts that are probably pissing you off the most in this one based on how your dating life is going.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Timing on this was perfection. And another reason why timing on this is perfection is because as we step out of May and into June, we step out of Mental Health Month and into Pride Month. And this book covers both of those topics. In my opinion, coming from the mental health side of things, I found in a really good way. I like the way Rina Kent handled a lot of what was discussed in these books. And I have personal experience with a lot of these as well, so we'll talk about that later. And then we get to dive into the Pride part, which I have only anecdotal feelings about because of literally everyone I know being some form of gay.
It's so fair. And I think I can probably relate a little bit to Bran and how he shows up. I related to Bran the most. And I think we can talk about that. Quick summary of what God of Fury is about. And there are 35 books in this universe, so Daria has a lot more context than I did going into it, because this was also the 5th book of this series or something like that.
Yes, so Legacy of Gods is soon to be a 6-book series. Shout out to Rina. 13th of June. I'll be here. This is the 5th book in a 5, soon to be 6-book set of standalone romances that are interconnected. So even in her synopses, like, you can read them on their own, but this is not the first series in this universe. The first series, and there are several of them, are of their parents. So all of these kids, all of their parents, you kind of meet them a little bit throughout the books. The original stories in this universe are their stories, and these are their children.
And I actually almost had a problem with starting in the 5th book of the series, because just something to know about me is I can't do anything half-assed, and I can't jump into anything midway through. When I got into Brandon Sanderson, I went through YouTube videos, Reddit videos, just everything in between, trying to figure out, okay, where do I start? How do I get the most out of this experience? Like, Reddit was my best friend for that kind of thing. And so I was like, what do you mean I'm starting on book 5? That's so illegal. It's not even funny. But I think that I'm okay with doing it in this scenario, because it is a standalone. Like, is there things that I'm definitely missing, and I could tell that I was missing from the earlier books? Absolutely. It wouldn't be a series if you didn't. But I still got the
gist.
Yeah.
And I think one of the really cool things with this series, and a big kudos to Rina Kent for doing this, is all 6 of these books take place at the same time.
Oh.
Or very close to the same time. So
that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, so like, my favorite thing in these, and this is not a spoiler, is the Truth or Dare thing, that the game they play at the bar.
Yeah.
You get to read that exact experience, but from Glenn and Killian's perspectives.
From a different little POV.
Yeah, and you get to see them being like, I wonder why Bran has that weird look on his face. And then you read God of Fury, and you know why Bran has that weird look on his face. Or why Nico gets pissed off, stands up, and leaves.
Right, okay, that makes sense. For those of you who haven't read God of Fury, it is a male-male dark college romance. We have 2 college clubs or groups or frat houses, and so there's one called the Elites, and then there's the other called the Heathens. And the Heathens have like a mafia family associated with them. The Elites, I think they're just a club of a family.
The rich British kids next door.
And so one of our main characters, Brandon, or Bran, so as the book calls him, he receives a text from one of the leaders on the Heathens saying, we have your twin brother Landon, also known as Lan, and if you want him to be safe, you have to come to one of our initiations. And Bran and Lan have a bit of a complicated relationship, but not so much that Bran wants him injured. So he goes to the initiation. And during this initiation, the Heathens, the leaders of this group, walk out of the house with a number of weapons, and they say, you have to get off of this property and run away from us. Otherwise, if we catch you or hit you or use violence in any way that we feel like it, then you don't get to be part of our club. So Bran is running around, and he gets caught, sort of, by one of the Heathens' leaders, Nico. But
also
Nico,
affectionately known as Yellow Mask.
Yellow Mask, who is the violent kid of a very powerful mafia leader. Terrifying human being. Huge. 6-something.
Oh, yeah.
6'5", 6'6".
And built.
Tattoos.
Piercings.
Has a history of beating people up with just his fists, and he takes Bran back to the property and says, you are in, for whatever reason. And our book escalates from there.
With that quick synopsis of this book, what were your spoiler-free thoughts?
Okay, so you described this as a contemporary romance, which gave me some weird expectations about it, because I read a lot of contemporary fiction that is non-romantic or very soft on the romance. And I didn't believe that this was going to be a contemporary romance. I will say I was very wrong in that assumption. I think it did succeed at giving me the contemporary that I was kind of looking for. So I did like that aspect, and I think I got some of the depth that I wanted, but I was very skeptical leading up. Like, it was 250 pages where I was like, I need more, I need more, I need more. And then it gave me more, and then it kind of took it away from me at the end. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think the writing style is one of them that I struggled with. And I also think that the romance side of things took some stuff away from me because I was just not down for this couple.
Oh no.
But you knew that going in.
Yeah.
He texted him so many times back to back, like nonstop.
That would be the golden retriever part.
It was just like, hey, where are you? What are you doing? Why aren't you answering my text messages? Blocked immediately. End of book. The end.
I dare you to do that in your real life. Haley's very much Bran.
And you know what? I did definitely relate to Bran more than I did to Nico, obviously.
I think most sane humans would.
But I am curious. So, in this book, Bran is the uptight control freak. He has put so many walls up. He hides his emotions. He, like, wakes up at 5 a.m. every morning to go for his run because if his routine is messed up, then everything else gets messed up. Like, I am Bran a little bit.
Yeah.
And Nico is the golden retriever who will not leave Bran alone. He is obsessed with Bran. He is kind of a fuckboy for the most part, leading up to this.
Yeah.
And Bran changes him. And I think I spent a little bit too much time thinking about how that would feel for me. And it's funny because I would be so not down with it. I'm just... Don't text me that many times. You don't need to be obsessed with me. Don't put me on a pedestal. Like, screw that. But that's also how Bran felt the whole time.
Yeah, no. It was very much so the extrovert just decided to adopt that introvert and was like, this is happening.
Yes, and Bran hated it. I just don't love that the persistence actually got him to be vulnerable.
Question for you. How do you get someone to be vulnerable in that situation? For the context on this, I only adopt introverts, and I've destroyed each and every one of their barriers to dust with persistence. Like, my best friend Logan would not speak to me for more than like 2 sentences when we first met, and now if I texted him and was like, hey, I need you, he'd hop on a plane today and be here. But
that's... Okay, fair enough. You and Logan are adorable, though. You guys have a great relationship. It's not healthy. The whole situation was not a healthy coming to terms with his situation.
Oh, no. No, it's not supposed to be. That's the fantasy in it. That's the fiction.
I don't have the capability of seeing it as fiction.
Okay.
I make it too real.
That's a whole other problem. Yeah.
I recognize that. But that was where I really, really struggled with this.
See, in this one, I empathize with Nico and Brandon in a lot of ways. I think is where I'm different. Because I do, like, I am the extrovert in our friend group. And I think I'm the only one.
Yeah, probably.
Out of all of us. So, like, I'm the person who has to break people down and be like, hey, like, let's hang out. Let's do this thing. Like, let's go out. Let's do stuff. Like, I need someone to be there. Otherwise, my emotional battery is dead. So, like, I totally get where Nico's coming from, where he's like, okay, well, this is my human. Mm-hmm. Granted, not in this level of psychosis, but, like, this is my human, so, like, let's go. And then, like, breaking them down and getting that in there. You know how many times I have to text Abby sometimes before she replies to me?
True.
Or, like, my friend Megan will leave me on red for months. The only way I can we work together in a capacity where she has to reply to me, and that is the only way I get a hold of her. And then I tell her to check her text messages.
The other thing that kind of kept pulling me away from this book was the fucking names. You're telling me, so you have 2 separate families. Both of them have twins in that family. On one side, we have Brandon and Landon, nicknamed Bran and Lan.
Yeah.
Stop. On the other family that hates each other, there's other twins. Maya and Mia. I don't know which one is which. I don't care. Like, that's ridiculous. And then we talk about the fucks.
Oh, yeah, Haylee has this. It's so funny, too, because I texted everyone I've had read this book, and none of them noticed it.
That blows my mind because it's one of the first things that I notice when I read books is if they overuse certain phrases or words, particularly swear words. When I read things on my Kindle, I have the ability to search up on the Kindle certain words and see how many times it's come up. Because I did this with Iron Flame, because in Iron Flame, Xaden always described Violet as fucking beautiful, fucking perfect, you're fucking flawless. Like, it was the same thing over and over again. I got pissed off. And that is like an 800-page book. When I searched for the fuck in that one, it was like 360. I thought that that was a lot. Nothing compared to this book.
Yeah, no, I will say, like, once you did the search, I was like, yeah, okay. But then I was just listening to the audiobook before we started this, didn't notice a single one.
That's crazy.
Like, they do not clock in my brain.
That's so funny. So this book is 510-ish pages. The word fuck in some capacity was used 1,239 times.
Couldn't tell you a single one of them.
That is over 3 times per page.
I'm sure it clocked in at like 10 to 20 times on some of those pages.
Oh, yeah, because I would like notice it and then it would be in one paragraph just like 4 times.
I'm trying to think about how often I use that word in real life, and it's probably also an obscene amount.
Yeah, or the one phrase that Nico used all the time was fuck me the fuck off. Or something like that. He did that 4 or 5 times in the span of like 3 chapters, and I wanted to strangle him, which he would have probably liked.
I really would have enjoyed that. I'm pretty sure, yeah, that definitely happened. That everything's happened to Nico that could possibly ever happen in a bedroom.
I will say this is one of my first male-male romances that wasn't young adult.
So they actually had sex.
They actually had sex, which I thought actually was very interesting.
I will also say, for as someone who obviously has not experienced this in the male perspective, but has experienced that kind of sex, well written for once too. Like, appropriate prep, and like, I'm trying to decide on what words I want to say on here, but like, I'm going to go with that. Just appropriate prep was done in multiple occasions where I was like, you actually took the time to do this properly. And she must have done research or partakes.
They researched or whatever safe sex for it. And I will say it was somewhat educational for me. I'm not so naive to not know how male-male sex works, but I don't know a lot of the specifics and I don't know what is preferred or some of like the ways that they might do it, which I found really interesting because I feel like I also learned a lot about gay sex, which is kind of cool.
Educational.
It was educational.
And I will say, like, not poorly written in a way that was unrealistic for what that could look like.
I wouldn't know. Again, I don't have one. It didn't, like, it seemed like it was very natural and it seemed like the romance actually made sense. Because, you know, especially, I don't know, like 10 years ago when people would put like gay representation into movies and TV and books and things like that, it was very over the top. A lot of it, like gay men, it was very flamboyant. It was very stereotypical because people weren't actually doing their research or seeing how romance worked.
Or seeing a variety of gay men living their lives. Either most of them were hiding.
Yes, exactly. And I think it did a really good job of creating a character, Bran, who had not come to terms with his sexuality, and there was a lot of depth as to why he hadn't, or it was very clear that he was not educated on what his sexuality was or how to discover that, and he never gave himself or was given the space to explore that. And I think it did a really good job of him coming to terms with that and understanding it, and later on being able to communicate that.
And I think kudos to Nico for creating an environment where Bran was like, okay, I can work through this with you and figure that out. And also for Nico for realizing that he actually probably wasn't straight and hiding it.
We can talk about that because I don't know that I agree with that.
No?
Nico has his problems.
Well, yeah, Nico's insane. But how many people have you comfortably come out to in a romantic relationship?
I feel like that's actually a really interesting question because I don't know that I've ever really struggled to come out romantically, and I think that is something that maybe I take for granted sometimes, is I've never felt particularly uncomfortable or unsafe coming out to a partner before.
Okay.
But I think when we talk about the walls and the vulnerability, I don't know that I've ever really done it in a super vulnerable way. I always find a way to slip it into a conversation just super nonchalantly or in a way that there's no room for further conversation, which checks out.
Yeah, no, it definitely does.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think I just bring it up in a way that I'm just like, take it or leave it. I don't care, but we're not going to talk about it anymore. That's what I did to my parents.
I can see this conversation.
And that was a choice too, because I know that one of my parents is not super supportive, but I also trust that parent to love me no matter what. And it was just easier on both of us to say, hey, this is what it is. We don't need to talk about it. They were perfectly fine not talking about it. And we're just going to continue life the way it is.
And obviously, like, this has never been a conversation I've ever had to have with someone because I am straight and it just is taken for granted that it's the case by default. But I have amazing parents in this sense. Like,
Yes.
I could walk up to either of them tomorrow and be like, I like men, I'm just into women. And they'd be like, both be like, okay, cool. What do you need from me? Nothing? All right, bye.
Right.
So I've never been in a situation or had to worry about the chances of my parents not accepting me for who I am in any way. My parents listen to this. My parents will be listening to this. And that's the choice they make, but it's not like I hide anything from them.
No, you have a very open communication relationship with your parents, which is cool.
And my sibling.
Yes, and your sibling. But I also think that for me, that coping mechanism is almost humor and bluntness in those conversations. And I've always been able to create the most safe space for myself around the people that I care about or who I decide to come out to when I just do it in a blunt and nonchalant way, a conversational way. Because I also don't really feel at this point in my life like I have any unresolved issues with my sexuality. I'm pretty comfortable in my bisexuality.
That's fair, yeah.
So I'm also, when I bring it up to people, I'm just like, yeah, I think men are hot. I think women are hot. I can't talk to women, but I think they're great.
Ain't that the story of every bisexual woman?
Yeah. But that's like an autism thing more than it's a sexuality thing.
That too.
All right, we're probably getting kind of into spoilers now. If you have not read God of Fury, pause, read it, come back. Or if you don't care, just continue to hear what we have to say about this book.
Did you read the dedication for this book?
I don't know if I did. Should I? Can I?
Yeah.
Grab the book. Can you actually put that mask on?
Yeah, I definitely can. Oh man, I get to live my inner Nico. Let's see if I can actually fit this on my head.
But girls are gonna go wild for this while I read this dedication. I'm gonna wait till you have this mask on.
Okay. How the shit did they see out of these things? There we go. Well, that is kind of creepy, actually.
Yeah, look at your camera.
I'm wearing this for Halloween this year.
Oh, you're gonna need somebody to dress up as a Bran.
Yeah. Oh, I could totally pull Nico. I've got enough tattoos.
Yes, you could.
I'll find a Brandon. I will find a man to be my Brandon just for Halloween.
Nice.
Okay, you can read your... This
Okay.
thing's hot, though, for the record. I am sweating.
To the ones who scream in silence. Oh, I get that. That makes sense.
I like the tone of voice you used to read it like it was going to be something really stupid, and then you realized it's about dedicated to everyone with depression.
Let me try again. To the ones who scream in silence.
There you go.
I actually do think I read that. I think I just like glazed over it. Yeah, okay. And I think that conversation around the depression and the way that people deal with it was probably my favorite part of this book.
I was trying to read through some reviews for this one. I didn't see a lot of people mentioning it, but holy shit, did she handle that well. And as someone who's experienced depression in a really similar way to Bran as far as like the self-deprecation, the constant narrative in your head that you're never going to be good enough and no one's going to love you because you can't live up to expectations was something I really related to. And then I don't know how I keep picking books with artists or having books where I can talk about art, but thank goodness, because like, yeah, my art is absolutely an outlet for that. And I do see the world in a similar way to Brennan, where it's like the color tones and the blackness and the seeping. I was like, oh, that one hit close.
Yeah, well, whenever he described his depression, he would describe this like black paint or vine, or I pictured it as paint that would be engulfing his body, and it would usually come from the ground up, and it would just like envelop him, and it would take him kind of, his demons would take over when he did it. And that hit really close to home, but it was also a really good parallel to the fact that he's an artist and he uses that as an outlet. And he was being really avoidant to like drawing eyes. That was a big thing for him, and he wasn't dealing with those emotions. And you talking about that being an outlet for you, I think of the fact that he wasn't drawing something that was scaring him so much, and how that probably prevented so much healing and made it so much worse.
Absolutely. And I think, especially, I don't know if this happens to all artists, but there will be images that'll pop into my head that have to come out on a canvas. Like I think the hand that I did for Whisper Waves is a really good example of that. Like I saw that in my brain at some point and I was like, I have to paint it now because it'll haunt me. Like I'll dream about it. I'll see it everywhere. It just like, I'll keep thinking about it. So to not do it would just eat away, especially if it's something that means that much to you, would just eat away your soul.
Yeah, and how he coped with that is how I cope with things. Is he wakes up at 5 a.m. every morning. He goes for his run at 5:30 every morning, and then he eats his breakfast at 7 a.m. and then he goes to school at 7:15 a.m. and then he does, right? And like the fact that I remember each time that he was doing everything is kind of a testament to how close I am to that. Like that is the way that I deal with things. I need to enforce control over everything that I possibly can when there are things that feel out of my control or that are bothering me and things like that, because I am avoidant.
Bran's depression and trauma is one of the biggest points and one of the things in this book that I really like the way it was done. And then obviously the fiction portion of this is the way Nico kind of breaks through that.
Yeah, and that's part of what I had so many issues with, because you have read some non-con stuff, and that's from a sexual perspective. But for me, it was really hard for me to be okay with Nico being so pushy, because I know that I don't like that in my regular life, and I really empathized with Bran. He was my character. He was the person I related the most to. He was the person I felt the most for. And when Nico was pushing him, I know how that feels. And I know how Bran was feeling, because we were going through it with Bran, and Bran was like, no, this is uncomfortable. I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. And I was like, Nico, he hates it. Don't do this to him. Even though I understand that Bran has a lot of growth to do, he almost needs someone to take him out of that and push him. And obviously that is the point of this book. I was so uncomfortable with it. I was so angry about it.
I hate this about myself right now, but one of the biggest things I ever learned from work that I actually think was totally valuable and valid was you will never grow if you're comfortable.
100%.
Like you will never be a better person, you will never heal, you'll never get anywhere in life being comfortable. And I think there are definitely cases and some things where I need another human being to do it for me.
Yeah.
Like I can't push myself past some of these on my own.
And Bran obviously couldn't either. And I completely agree with you. There is a book, it's nonfiction, I'm sorry everybody, that is called Think Like a Rocket Scientist by Ozan Varol. And he talks about that the people who get ahead in life find danger in comfort more so than they do in unknown. That's not the direct quote, but it's close. And I have that pinned up on my whiteboard right now, because I know that I really will allow myself to just get into comfort and stay there and stay status quo. And I like to be pushed, but I like to be pushed within my own boundaries. And I don't know that I really know what those boundaries are. But when somebody pushes too much, I will shut them out completely.
Yes, you will.
And I don't even know how to push past that for myself.
Maybe condescending. You're young. Like, I think the years that made me get comfortable being uncomfortable were the years between 25 and 30.
That's fair.
The everything before 25, absolutely useless. It didn't really do much for me.
Yeah.
But 25 to 30 was when I started living on my own. I started dating outside of the 10-year-long relationship. I started doing all of that stuff and just pushing myself to do everything that was uncomfortable. And then I set super crazy goals for myself and hit all of them by 30.
I think because we both read this book called Attached. It's been very recent for me and very eye-opening.
I read this at 25.
And I am very clearly an avoidant for the most part.
Yeah.
A little bit of anxious. Basically, I'm the worst one.
It's the worst one in the sense that an anxious person usually only harms themselves. An avoidant person will harm everyone around them to keep themselves safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I found really interesting about that book specifically was that it talked about how, yes, your childhood does a lot to shape your attachment styles. And there's even some conversation about genetics, I think. But the other thing that also contributes to your attachment style is your previous relationships. And when I look back at all of the relationships that I've had in my life, I've definitely shown up as an avoidant for the most part, but I've also kind of got rid of a lot of the anxious side of me because I am a lot more confident in myself. I'm a lot more secure in what I need and who I am and things like that, way more so than I was when I was 17 or 18. But I also think a lot of those relationships have made me more avoidant and more scared. And I've almost gone like full, don't push me.
Whereas, like, I think my first one made me anxious.
Okay, yeah, that checks out.
Body dysmorphia is a fun thing that just destroys the rest of your life. And then every relationship since then has made me more secure, I think. And I am gonna give romance books a big prop for this one. They have taught me to accept nothing less than what I want.
Ooh.
The more I've read them, especially this past 8 months since my last one ended, I was like, no, why settle for anything less than what I want?
Absolutely.
And I shouldn't have to. And I think, yeah, I will give romance books kudos for that one. They've made me more secure in being willing to cut what I don't want and seek what I do. We bring up attachment styles, though, because obviously Brandon is very avoidant, and Nico is very, very secure in himself, if a little anxious.
Nico's got to have a bit of, but it is a spectrum. Like,
it is definitely a spectrum.
Because when they talk about secure people being about half of the population, it's like, sure, but also there's going to be situations where you show up as avoidant or anxious no matter who you are.
There's always going to be that lingering thing in you. Like mine, sex. I have such a hard time with that in relationships now after the ones I've been through and the way men have treated me in them, where I'm so anxious about it. And I show up as an anxious person with it. And so far that has not been resolved because I would actually have to have a human being present to like work through it with me. And that's not in the cards at the moment.
We're working on
that. You can check out my most recent TikToks about that one. We might dive into that in my TikTok. We'll find out.
Some interviews.
We'll see if they ever message me back. But I also think that's one of the reasons why you don't like this book.
I think so too, because Nico pushed really hard, probably a little bit outside of not a little bit outside of my comfort zone, way outside of my comfort zone for what I would be comfortable with, obviously. And I really felt for Bran during that time. But I'm also a big believer, I like to work things out on my own. Like, I go to therapy and I want to do it on my own. I don't want to do it with somebody else. Because that's a level of vulnerability that me and Bran are not comfortable with.
Whereas, like, I'm the opposite of that. I was like, I'd like to work it out with someone. Well, obviously, the sex thing, the way it's impacting my life, I have to work it out with another human. That's going to involve a lot of stuff. And especially the kind of sex I like requires a little bit of support.
She's taking interviews, everybody.
Yeah, there's also a house husband aspect of this, though. So you gotta bring more than just that to the table. I also require home cleaning and dog walking.
We are accepting interviews.
And my standards are hella high.
As they fucking should be.
You know the song for like the 6'5" dude that works in finance? I'm the 5'3" girl that works in tech.
Trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes.
And I make enough money that I don't need a trust fund.
I saw one today actually that was like 6'5", goes to therapy, something like that, and it was great. I was like, that's what I need. Work your shit out without me.
Yeah. Haylee is also not here to help support you in your shit. And then the other piece here for mental health, actually I have a couple things down for mental health, but Nico being bipolar was also something. Well, she doesn't outright say Nico's bipolar. As someone who's experienced that a lot, not personally, but the life with people who have it. Oh my God.
We are armchair diagnosing people on this podcast. We've said that before. Say it again. I would say he's bipolar. But one of my favorite aspects of Nico is that they didn't have to outright say that he was bipolar. Same thing with Bran. They didn't have to outright diagnose him with depression. And I liked that part because my favorite thing about contemporary fiction is that they are a little bit vague and they allow the reader to really feel the things that are going on without having to say, I am bipolar. I sometimes have outbursts and I sometimes do not. Whereas I actually got to go through that journey with Nico and say, okay, I'm with him for his manic episode. I'm with him for his depressive episode. I'm with him while he's trying to push Bran away. And I get to experience that, but I don't need those words to be said outright to still enjoy that experience. And that's something that I did like about this aspect of the book. I think that they didn't do it a good job of it throughout the whole book, but this part I thought they did.
I liked this piece. I also liked the way she handled and talked about the medication throughout that section too, because Nico does have what I'm going to assume is lithium.
Oh, maybe. That makes sense.
But she chooses not to take it because of the brain fog it induces, which is a constant conversation with anyone who has these kinds of mental illnesses.
Well, I remember when I was on Ativan and for my anxiety.
Oh, I've been there.
And I was addicted, first of all, because that stuff's rocked. But I couldn't do anything on that. I was not a human being.
I'd also forget I was on it all the time.
Yes.
And I would accidentally like drink wine or something and just be absolutely decimated.
Yikes.
Yeah, don't do that. But yeah, so I thought that conversation though was really interesting because it like Nico does get to the point where he's like, okay, I do need to take my medication. Doesn't necessarily take it consistently, but he acknowledges the fact that he's in a position where he could hurt Bran.
Yeah.
Like mentally, not physically ever, but emotionally, like he could be manic and do something that is harmful to the relationship. He's like, no, like this is unacceptable for me. And then was like, okay, I'll take my medication.
Which is so interesting because Nico had such a weird level of self-awareness with those things, because I think this kind of goes back to that human connection side of things, where Nico was obviously very in tune with Brandon's emotions because he knew when to push him. He knew that Bran wasn't straight. He knew that Bran had some unresolved things that he needed to work through, and he knew he needed to be pushed. And the idea that he was self-aware enough to know when he was going to hurt Bran and when he wasn't also gives the supporting evidence that he was working in Bran's best interest and he knew how to do that and that he loved him and all of those things. Because while I had issues with the way that Nico pushed in a lot of those areas, that was supporting evidence that he still did have Bran's best interest at heart, and maybe that's why it worked.
And I think that's kind of the way you have to do that in these to make them work, is you need to have that almost like empathic personality that you can attribute those leaps and jumps to. Otherwise, stuff like this just doesn't work.
Yeah, because when he had Bran up against the tree, Bran was very clearly like, no, 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 I don't want this, stop. And Nico still did. I was like, this is pushing my boundaries a little bit for what I'm okay with here.
That knocks so many books off your potential list for this.
Honest though about it, like, he was not getting consent in that scenario because that's a pretty black and white thing. It ended up working out because of Nico's intuition that he had with Bran and knowing what Bran needed in that scenario. And I think that's the direction of why it made it okay in the end. But let's be clear, he did not get consent during that situation. Because they have the kinks with each other, and like, Nico likes that aspect of it. So does Bran, I think. I think Bran liked it.
Oh, yeah.
But there was not consent in that scenario, in a few scenarios.
One of the reasons why I love Nico as a character, and I'm gonna lump him in with some other dark romance boys, but like Zayd from Haunting Adeline, Malachi from Little Stranger, is the concept of a guy that one knows what you need and is going to do it for you, and two will burn the fucking world down for you. Like I think that's one of the things I crave most in a partner is one that will just pick me over everyone else. Like because my last ex picked his mom.
Yeah, he did.
To the point where my friends, when we split, and I was like, yeah, like, he cut it off with me and everything, they're like, oh, so he's gonna go fuck his mom now? Because that was how everyone knew, like, he was gonna pick her over me at some point, and I was just living in delusion. Shouldn't have been. And that woman was so abusive, and still picked her over me. My first ex, literally anyone else in the world over me.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the thing that's so alluring about these guys is being able to have someone that you know without a shadow of a doubt in any situation, they're going to have your back.
Right. Yeah. And you kind of had said something too about knowing what you need. And I do think that that is a really important thing about relationships because I feel like when I've been dating and, you know, going through my single phase and everything like that, I feel like people have put this really high expectation on communication. And I also have too, where I worry about people who don't communicate super clearly what they want and what they need and everything like that. And when you do that, yes, you need clear communication, but you also shouldn't have to communicate every single little thing. Like
or every time.
Yeah, there needs to be a level of connection with that person where you feel intuitively that, hey, I know how to support this person. I know how to be around them. I know how to be in silence. Like, those are things that I really see in my relationships when I'm with them, if that's a possibility. And when it's not, it's like, we're not going to be able to communicate if you can't just somewhat intuitively have an understanding of who I am and be able to see me. I need it to feel somewhat natural.
Yes, and like context clues in the world. Actually, this plays so beautifully into my next points I was going to bring in because we were talking about the dubious consent and also the intuitive pieces here. And one of the things, and this is going to be a spoiler and also a trigger for this book. Oh God, if you haven't already got this far and you haven't read the trigger warnings on this book, that's a whole other problem. One of the things with BDSM and that dubious consent is reframing trauma. I think there's lots of papers that exist out there. The one that I most recently read was Curative Kink: Survivors of Early Abuse Transformed Trauma Through BDSM by Corey J. Casa something or other. But I'm sure you can find it with just that title. And it was really interesting to read about how sexual assault survivors would reframe their own trauma through things like BDSM and kink, where you could relive something that happened to you with full control.
Right.
And I think for myself, and one of the biggest things with BDSM is that, like, you have 100% control of the situation that's happening while having absolutely none of it at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite part. And part of that intuitive piece there is, like, I don't want to have to sit down and walk my partner through everything I want to happen, in this case, in bed. That's your job. Figure it out, man. Like, I don't want to be directing this show. It's on you. And I think I really liked that in this, where it was like, Nico was just able to be like, I know what you need. You might not know that you need it right now, but like by the time we're done with this, you're going to. And that's why I think one of the most valuable parts of like a Dom sub relationship is being able to trust your Dom to do exactly what you need and just go with the flow of it. And obviously, if you hit a hard boundary, you have your safe word, which is the part that you have full control over. And you can nope out of it, which granted, this book does not have that at all. It's not a really big thing in dark romances. We cut that piece out just because dark romances too are a lot of women reframing their own trauma and living it through someone else.
I think that's also maybe kind of a given in these books. Like, we're reading fiction. I think in these books you can probably push it a little bit further, because even when you're talking about that being a form of healing, these books can probably also do that in a way for you where you don't need to actually have the sex, where you can read a book that's maybe about it. And I can imagine that that could also be a form of therapy and healing for a lot of people. And you also might be able to push those boundaries a little bit more in books because it's fiction and you're in the safety of your own home. You can literally close it if it's not doing what you need for it.
And I feel like it's step one. Also, if you're like a girl like me who's in an intense dry spell, that's all you're getting. One of the things I appreciate a lot about books and this is that you can read some depraved fucking shit and it hurts literally no one.
Right.
Like those dudes on TikTok were like, I understand why women are reading all this romance and this dark romance. And I was like, one, because I never want to live through this experience again in my life. But I do find it very cathartic to read about it and like work through the residual feelings of that in book format where it's not like porn, which is a horrible industry that harms so many people, and like human trafficking and enslavement. That's not happening in my book. My author is not like strapped to her computer, hopefully, being forced to write these things against her will. Like she's working through her trauma and I'm working through mine, and no one gets hurt in the process.
And I think that's something that's actually really important to note because you see on TikTok like a bunch of people going, you read porn and you're reading straight porn and how is it any different? And it is so much different. There is a complete vast difference in the industries of how you're putting something in a book. Like, yes, yeah, you're kind of reading porn. Like, I'm not going to beat around the bush there.
Absolutely.
But the way that it's done and the back end work of that is so much healthier and it's not harming anybody, like you said.
Yeah, like you don't have to read it. No one is going to make you read, well, except for you. But
Daria's making me. Let's blink twice if you need help.
In a general sense, no one is going to make you sit down and read the smut.
Exactly.
It's a full choice. Just like, I hope, unless you're kind of consenting to this, no one's strapping you down and making you watch porn. And to like idolize the porn industry over the publishing industry for this is insane.
100%.
No one's ever broken into a publishing house and been like, oh gosh, these cam girls are here against their will because a certain bald dude decided to lock them in this house and con them into working for him. That's not how that works.
Just saying.
Oh, another piece here. I also wrote down, just for some knowledge and not so fun facts, I pulled this from the Government of Canada's website, but 5% of sexual assaults in Canada are reported. 30% of those sexual assaults are perpetrated on women, and 5% of them are perpetrated on men. And I wanted to highlight that number for men because it is a big piece of this book. Not on Nico's part. Granted, there's a whole conversation we just had there, but actually, like, Bran's deep-rooted trauma that results in a lot of what Nico has to break through.
As Bran was sexually assaulted when he was 15 or 16.
By a trusted individual in their home, not a family member, thank fuck. But that 5% number, Haylee and I were talking about this before we filmed. I know more men who have been sexually assaulted to the extent that Bran was in real life than I do women.
That's really interesting.
And like not even by like a small margin either. Unless a lot of the women I know haven't spoken to me about it, which is totally fair. But I'm also imagining, given that very wide range of statistics, a lot of men I know also haven't spoken to me about it. And I just think it goes to show, like, we definitely need more of a conversation around that. We need more men to feel comfortable talking about it. Because Brad also, like, he doesn't choose to divulge this information to literally anyone. It's all against his will.
I have actually read 2 books in the last year where it has been a focus on men being sexually assaulted when they were younger. And in both of those books, both of them were contemporary fictions, one of them being this and the other being A Little Life. Both of those books, those men grew up to have internal dialogue about how they thought that they would be perceived as a bad person, perceived as disgusting, perceived as I did this horrible thing and I am a horrible being because of it. That was the perception that they grew up with. So the reason that they didn't share or divulge that information or lean on anybody for support was because they thought themselves as disgusting and they were scared that their trusted ones would see them as less than and disgusting for that offense.
And a lot of the men I know that's had this happen to them blame themselves. Like, they're always like, well, I shouldn't have been that drunk, or I shouldn't have been in that situation, or I trusted that person and like maybe this is what I deserved.
In Bran's case, it was, well, I kissed her back because I didn't know what else to do. And it's like, dude, you're 15 and you were groomed by this human being and it was a trusted individual and you weren't supposed to know what to do.
No, and that's exactly what one of the men I know said. He's like, I couldn't, how do I make it stop? Like, I don't know how to make it stop. We don't teach boys how to make it stop. And we should.
And in that other book, it was a human trafficking situation where he left with the trusted individual from his original home, and that trusted individual took him and said, we're going to go and we're going to live a beautiful life, but first you have to do this. And he saw himself as being responsible for all of those things that he did, and that's why he basically never told anybody. And I find that such an interesting conversation. We don't have the same support for men in those scenarios that we do for women nowadays.
No, or the same education when they're young.
No.
About,
and there's still such a stigma to it.
And like, don't get me wrong, the education for women sucks too. Like, it just sucks. But we'd at least equip young girls with some kind of tool set to scream, to fight, to roll, not to fight. Like, the narrative on it's horrible too. There's just nothing that's cohesive. We don't even talk about it with boys.
It's not a conversation. Boys are taught not to do it to women, and women are taught how to prevent men from doing it to them.
But no one ever teaches a woman not to do it to a man, and a man how to prevent it from happening to them.
It's all so fucked.
And I think I really appreciate that in this book and bringing that in, because don't get me wrong, most of these books up here, all these horrific things happen to women and they work through that. God of Fury is one of the very few books I own where we get to go through that experience with a man, and I appreciate that it at least starts a narrative in the romance world and the book world about that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where that contemporary fiction side of things really came for me, and I actually really enjoyed it. I had some problems with the writing, absolutely. I don't think it was the best written contemporary fiction that I had ever read, and so when I rated this, I rated it lower because of that. But even after talking about it, I do feel a little bit more connected to the story and enjoy what it did explore. It was particularly the writing and some of the character names and things like that that I struggled with. But at the end of the day, I think that it explores a lot of really important issues. Bran's depression really hit home to me, like the self-harm stuff that he used as a coping mechanism was something that I obviously related to quite a bit. It had me on the verge of tears a couple of times because of it.
I sobbed on a plane when Bran's video was playing and they were talking like that. Oh man, that was the worst timing.
Where I almost cried.
Yeah, that section, like Nico living through it was what made me cry on a plane.
But I think that that goes into he puts Bran first before everything, and he just wants to protect him from that pain.
Wait, which areas had you tearing up?
Okay, you know what? Maybe it was when Nico saw the video, and then Bran came in and saw Nico watching the video.
Oh yeah, I was crying for like a solid 10 minutes. Don't get me wrong. It was like all the way through that scene.
Because I just felt that it got me emotional whenever Nico discovered something about Bran that Bran was trying to hide from him. Because I know that fear of someone finding out something about you that you think is going to make them see you in a different light and see you negatively. That is one of my biggest fears in life. So when Nico found out about the cutting and when he found out about the video and he found out all of those things, that is when I started to choke up a little bit.
That part probably made this crying start, and then what really pushed me over the edge was the way Nico handled it. Like, he was just immediately like so supportive, there being like, what do we need? What do we do? How are we supporting? Like, what? It wasn't anything to do with Nico. He was like, this is all about you.
Didn't even need to think about it.
And that part just like sent me over the edge because it goes to that thing of someone choosing you.
Yeah.
It's all I crave.
And Bran just didn't believe that he would deserve that. And I struggle with that. But it is so nice to see that you can create a character who will love you no matter what. And I don't even like the word despite it, because it was never despite it for Nico. It was because of all those things, and he loved him through all of that and was willing to work with him through it. Like that is so special.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I love Nico so much, and that he gets to live rent free in my brain constantly. This is actually one of the only books I've ever read that I've been willing to get a tattoo for too, to be honest. And I say tattoo for in the sense that, like, I hate quote tattoos. Like, I'm dyslexic. They're a bad idea for me.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna read the whole line, but the second half of this will live on my body at some point, and that's, even if you hate yourself, I'll love you for the both of us. That made me cry too.
Yeah. This book didn't have any really hard-hitting quotes for me. I think it tried a little bit too hard, in my opinion, but
Fair.
there were some times where I got those feelings that it was a good contemporary romance. It's ranked lower for a contemporary fiction, but it's also like my first contemporary romance. It did have that contemporary fiction aspect to it. If I was rating it as a contemporary fiction, it would definitely be on the lower side of that. But because it's a romance, it does get an extra point because I'm just like not a romance girly in general. So it's kind of a different genre for me.
What is your rating?
After this conversation, I will bump it up to a 3 out of 5 stars.
Hell yeah, I'll take that.
It was a 2 before.
Okay. What changed in the conversation?
I actually think that talking about these books just make me like it more, because one of my favorite things about reading in general is being able to have conversations like this, being able to learn something new, being able to see things from different perspectives and understand just love in general, because that's not something that really comes naturally to me.
Maybe I'll break your barriers down with romance books slowly. We'll chip away at each little brick, one by one, with beautiful love stories.
Yeah, because that's what I struggle with the most with these. Like, I don't do sappy and cheesy, and that's what I didn't like about this book the most. With that being said, being able to have a conversation like this with you, which is part of the reason we started this to begin with, truly enhances my experience. So I don't think I actually like the book more than I did prior. I still have my problems with it, and there was still a lot of pieces that I didn't enjoy about it. But being able to hear your perspective and why you liked it and what you got out of it, and also how important this book is in a lot of ways, I do think that it enhances my experience of the book in particular.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Again, this is like, I was reading through all my friends on Goodreads' thing, and one of them just had like an infinity sign out of 5 on it, and I feel like that's how I feel about this book.
Right.
But it just made me feel so many things. Yeah. Like, I felt sad, felt happy, felt frustrated. I was like, why are we doing this?
I definitely felt frustrated.
And I like it when books make me upset in like that way. Like, I want to be frustrated by my book. I want to live that human experience with them.
You want to get a reaction out of it.
I want a roller. Like, the more emotions you can make me feel in a book, the higher I'm going to rate it.
Okay. Well, I think we've done that very successfully with all of our Get Swapped books so far.
Yes. Absolutely. And it'll just get better from here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make any promises that's the most unhinged romance you'll ever get from me.
We're going to work our way up, like you said, brick by brick.
And I actually don't count God of Fury as a dark romance. I count it as like a college romance more so than anything else. Like, it's on the borderline of a dark romance, but I think, the other men in this series do way worse things than Nico does. But for this one, like, yeah, the content on that one, like, the consent is dubious, but it's not there. Like, right. Bran is more than capable of making Nico stop.
That's fair. Yeah, I guess.
Like, in a physical sense, if Bran really didn't want something to happen, Bran is more than capable of stopping him because he's not a small dude.
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
Or unfit in any way, shape, or form.
No, he hot.
But both those boys are spicy. But I do have books. There are so many books on the shelf that does not exist in any way, shape, or form. Great.
I'm not ready for those yet.
I know. Don't worry.
All right, well, I guess we will wrap it up there. That was a pretty jam-packed episode of all of the conversations. Thanks so much for tuning in. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Haylee Johnson with a fancy little underscore. I'm on Goodreads as well.
And you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and Goodreads as Daria Can Read. Thank you so much for joining us for this final episode of Mental Health Month and the kickoff for Pride Month. We have a lot of fun stuff planned for conversations this month around Pride. A lot of reading. We're going to dive into some sports. So stick with us because maybe I'll make Haylee read a sports romance with some dudes in it too.
I can get behind that.
I got some good football ones. All right. Have a wonderful week and catch us in 2 weeks.
Bye.